Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
Ron, I want to get your thoughts on this. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and he was telling me what a nightmare his rental properties are. And I was thinking about it, and rental properties can be a nightmare, but they don't have to be. What do you think about that?
You know, I totally agree. It can be overwhelming in the beginning. If you let the tenants run the show and not have clear, concise guidelines and run your business efficiently, oh boy, it can overtake you pretty quickly if you're not careful.
Yeah.
But run properly. I'll tell you what, it doesn't have to overtake your life. And I operate in the Class C market. So those are pretty intense markets to operate, and it doesn't have to overtake your life if you don't let it.
Ron has figured out some really cool shortcuts that make the management of his rental properties super easy. And today on the podcast, he's going to share with us exactly what he's doing. Joining us on the show today from Connecticut is Ron Faraci. We'll take a really quick break. We'll come right back and we'll meet Ron. The first step in buying a rental property is to get pre-qualified. And I would suggest you work with a lender that specializes in working with investors, because the last thing you want to have happen is to get to closing and find out the money's not there and you can't close. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's a nationwide lender and she'll pre-qualify you for free if you mention Rental Income Podcast. Find out more today. Contact Chaley at ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com. NMLS 42056. Ron, when you decided you wanted to start buying rentals, you were living in California, but you decided to move to Connecticut to actually make your first purchase. Why did you do that?
You know, living in California, specifically Southern California, south of LA, in a place called Orange County, the prices were just so outrageous out there that It was just a back of envelope calculation. You know, I didn't know what a cap rate was at the time. I just knew that a 4-unit complex out there was going to cost me $2 million or whatever it was. And it just didn't pencil out. So off to Connecticut we went, where the valuations made a little more sense. And I was just chasing yield, and I chased it across the country, in fact. I didn't know any of what the financial metrics were. I just knew, you know, I could buy a 6-unit in Connecticut for $300,000 that would generate, you know, $4,500 to $5,000 a month in rent. And in Los Angeles or Orange County, I could get nowhere near that.
Right.
So it just sort of made sense, you know, in relation to my ultimate goal, which was to quit my job and replace my W-2 income with rental income. So I figured Connecticut was a much better place to attempt to do that.
So flash forward to today. So you've done it. You've quit your job. Today you support yourself on your rental income. So tell me about your portfolio. Like, what are your properties like? You mentioned that they were in a C-class neighborhood. Well, what are your typical tenants like? Tell us about your portfolio.
So portfolio, I mean, nothing sexy. It's meat and potatoes. It's a Class C, as in cat. So it's good, hardworking tenants who necessarily don't make a lot of money. My typical tenant, you know, is he'll work at Walmart. She'll work at, let's say, Dunkin' Donuts or something, and they make $12 an hour each. So they make $24 an hour, and they can afford a 2-bedroom apartment for about $950 a month, cold flat, which means that the tenants pay utilities. So they're not rough areas, but they're rough area adjacent.
Okay.
You know, and those Class C properties, if you don't manage them properly, can overtake you, like I said earlier. But you know, you gotta stay on top of it, run your business hyper efficiently, and it can be as close to passive income as you can get.
So how do you do this? So let's talk about how you do this, because it's not one thing. I guess there is probably multiple things that you're doing to run things in a way so that it's not taking over your life, right?
I work hard to minimize all touches with my tenant. Can't eliminate them, but you know, in my 28-page lease, which surprises some people that I have a 28-page lease, and I do, and they initial that lease probably 40 different times at our lease signing. But within that is all electronic communication only. You know, there's no verbal communication. I need an email or a text, because by having that can set into motion a maintenance, work order for me. Where if I take a phone call, typically, you answer the phone like most landlords do, and they'll be like, okay, it's a tenant calling. They freak out. They answer the phone and they explain what the issue is. And you say, okay, well, I can send somebody out there. Are you going to be home today? Sure, I'll be home today till 4. Then I got to take my daughter to a recital. They start, telling you the story.
Right.
So you call your, right. And so then you call your handyman, and he says, oh yeah, I can get out there. I can get out there about 5 o'clock. Oh, well, she'll be leaving at 4. She goes, okay, well, how about tomorrow? Then you got to call the tenant back.
Yep.
And so now you're in that vortex. You're really just scheduling stuff, aren't you?
Right.
So rule number 1 in my world is I just don't answer the phone. So if they leave a voicemail, the voicemail will transcribe it into text. And then I'll read the text. Oh, you've got a leaky sink. And I forward that text to my maintenance or handy person, the appropriate contractor. Because in the lease, it says, Mr. or Mrs. Tenant, you will schedule any repairs or maintenance with the appropriate tradesperson. You need the work done. He does the work. Y'all figure it out. But by answering the phone, I break that cycle, and so it's all these little things like that. Like I don't take checks. No money orders, anything like that. All my locks are electronic. I use a certain lock that doesn't cost me a lot of money, that if the batteries die or they even take them out, the lock still works with a 9-volt battery. I can jump it. So that becomes my master key. And when I started doing that, people thought it was because, well, if a tenant locks themselves out, I don't have that call anymore, which is true. But the real reason that I do that is so when a contractor has to go to a unit for something, usually it's during the day, tenants work during the day. How are they going to get into the building or to the unit?
Right.
The tenant's at work. So how he has to do it is he has to come to my office, pick up a key, go do the job, then drop off the key at the end of the day because I want my key back, and they're going to charge you for that time. So by having all electronic with master codes, he can just go right to the building, punch in the code, go do the job and leave.
Yeah.
So it's all these little things that add up to minimal touches.
I like that.
The things I use in my units, things of that nature.
I really like that. Minimize the touches. That's a great way to look at that. So let's dive into some of this. So let's start with the lease. So you mentioned you have a 28-page lease.
Yes.
Like, is it a lot of, did it start with your state lease and then did you just add in things as different issues came up over time?
Yeah, sadly, yes. Yeah. So, you learn, right? So, oh my goodness, I wouldn't have thought of this.
Yeah.
And you learn over time. And I run it by an eviction attorney every couple of years saying, hey, is there any new things I need to worry about in here and things like that. So it's certainly grown into this massive thing. And that's partly by design. There's no fine print in my lease. It's all there for the world to see. Mm-hmm. And that's important. So my lease up is about an hour long. I mean, I sit down, I go over line by line with them. It takes a long time.
Wow.
They have to initiate. Yes. But that could be the only time, I've got 100 tenants. So that could be the only time we ever see each other.
Right.
I don't fix anything. I don't know how to fix anything. So I'm not the handy guy going to be showing up.
Right.
So I need them to leave the lease up thinking, wow, Ron's a nice guy, but man, I better perform on this thing because there's a lot of toll gates there that if you don't perform are going to activate some financial penalties, which I intend to enforce.
So it sounds like you really have like zero tolerance with the lease. So everything is laid out. This is what we expect from you. And they're initialing so that they really understand. It's not just a document that they're signing and not reading. After meeting with you, they really know what's expected.
Yeah, they do. And I do that for myself, certainly. But I also do it for them. They should know. I think landlords do a disservice to people. And, they're signing a legal document. I get their name, I get their social security number, because that allows me to put them into collections, of which they signed a separate addendum that says it's a collection addendum that I can put them in, So all the rules are laid out, explained to them. There's no fine print. Everything down to the notice requirement. I do a month-to-month lease only, but they have to give me 60 days notice. And that 60 days doesn't begin until the first day of the following month that rent is due, and so that sounds confusing. When you're first here, you think, what the heck? However, but when it's explained in the addendums they sign, we actually give an example. This is why we do this. It's ultimately to help you. So yeah, they fully understand the rules of the road. And, knock on wood, 100 tenants over 10 years. I've had 4 evictions. That's it.
Wow.
Had to do cash for keys probably once a year, to be fair. But in my neighborhoods, that's not a bad record. So, and I think a lot of that has to do with spending time and investing that time in the lease up stage,
Yeah.
where I think most landlords kind of skip that stage.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Why do you do month to month? Why not lock him in for a year lease so that once you get him in there, you don't have to worry about it for a longer period of time?
The problem is in a Class C market, you can get some tenants that, let's just say, don't respect the lives of their neighbors. So if they sign a 1-year lease and they have friends over at 2:30 in the morning, constantly taking up 4 parking spots, playing their music loud all night, but they pay their rent on time, I'm stuck with them.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's really not a judge in Connecticut who's going to kick anybody out for any reason other than not paying rent. So they become a cancer in my building. Everybody else leaves, but these guys get to stay because they pay their rent. So the only one handcuffed by a 1-year lease is me, not them. They can leave, and they do leave. So I switched to month-to-month only about 4 years ago. And what I find is during the lease up, I explain to them, like, listen, Dan, it's a good building. I expect my rent on time. Here's the good news and bad news. The good news is that you can fire me anytime. I don't do what I say. You just give your notice. You can leave. The bad news is I can fire you at any time.
Right.
You have a party, you have anything like that, that's it. We're going to call it a day instantly. There's no second chances. And I find that I don't want to call it a power balance kind of shift. But that's the end result, is they understand that. And I find I get a tenant that's a little more respectful.
I really like that. It's no risk on both sides. I mean, if they get in the building and you're not taking care of it and they hate living there, they can get out, and you can get out if they're causing problems. I really like that.
It's worked well for me. It's worked very well for me.
Yeah. Now let's talk about getting paid. So you mentioned you don't take money orders. How do you collect rent every month?
So in the beginning, like everybody, I didn't know. Sure, send a check, or a money order. And the problem is, as you build your business, so if you own a 2-family unit or 2-unit, okay, it doesn't really matter if they send you a check. Probably not. You get a check on the first and maybe on the third. Done. So, but when you own a lot of units, what happens in my state, rent is due on the first, but it's really due on the 10th, and they know that.
Right.
So what ends up happening when you have 100 tenants, you're getting rents every day of the month, or checks, I'm sorry, every day of the month from the 1st to the 10th. And so you're running to the bank 10 days a month, and you're spending probably a half an hour to do that, round trip. And so invariably what people say is, well, Ron, why don't you just take, the first 5 days and then just go to the bank and make 2 trips and batch deposit. The problem in a Class C neighborhood is if they mail a check out on the 1st, you get it on the 5th. And if you wait 3 or 4 days to deposit it, now it's the 8th, then it takes 3 days to clear, and it's the 11th. Well, they mailed this thing 10 days ago. So they think, wow, I have more money left over than I thought I would this month. They don't realize the rent hasn't cashed yet, and it ends up bouncing. So now I got to chase these tenants for a bounce check, and it's not necessarily malicious, but here I am on the phone, and I've already failed at that point. Money orders are even worse. Have a tenant or the postal office lose a money order, and let me know how that works out for you. What happens is it takes at least 2 months for them to get reimbursed from the money order issuer. Well, in the meantime, in a Class C neighborhood, they don't have the money to pay you and then wait for their refund. So here you are. You've got I had to evict somebody. One of my 4 evictions was somebody who mailed in a money order, and it was 60 days. I didn't have a choice. I had to start the eviction process. And she moved out before it went too deep, but I lost a decent tenant, not a great tenant, but I lost a decent tenant because of that. So what I do today is 3 or 4 years ago, I said no more. So our state, you can't force them to pay electronically, which is a good thing. But most people in my neighborhoods don't pay electronically anyway. It's just not what they do. So every one of my buildings has a bank account because it's an LLC. And I usually try to open a bank account nearest the building because some of my tenants don't have cars. So they can walk to pay me. I don't want them to struggle and take a bus to pay me. So they can just deposit into my account. They get deposit slips at the lease up, and that deposit slip goes right into my account. So what happens is I number everybody's rent the same as their unit number. So if I get a deposit into this account, for $856, well, then I know that's unit 6. So if I get a deposit for $852, then I know it's unit 2.
Okay. So every rental has a different rent amount. So there's only
within
one
that building.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Because otherwise I could log into my account and if I get two account deposits for $850, I don't know whose rent it is.
Right. Okay. Right. So you give them like 12 deposits, or I guess like how many, like you give them like I guess several deposit slips so that they're all stocked up and they know how to pay. Now, is there any security? I mean, because they have your account number. Is there anything they could do with that? Or
they could put in more money. I'll be okay with that. So yeah, no, I mean, so I sweep the account every month anyway. But
okay,
and I get that question all the time. But I mean, if you kind of think about it, Dan, if you write a check today to your cable bill, whatever, look on the bottom of that check. There's your account number.
Right, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
It's no secret your account number.
Yeah.
So no, it's never been an issue. Knock on wood. I don't anticipate it. But,
what about
hey, live and learn.
What about partial payments? Like sometimes I have tenants that, maybe they don't have all the money on the first and they want to pay half on the first and the other half when they get paid. Does that mess you up if tenants do that? If you don't have the full rent amount, like because you don't know who it's from?
Yeah, so if they do that, that would mess me up.
Yeah.
So in our lease, in a couple different sections, they actually initial specifically that there's no partial rent payments.
Okay.
And then the reason we do that is not so much if they just want to split it in two, but the reason we do that is if we have to start an eviction against them, that they can't just put in $30 and then tell the judge, oh, he accepted rent, because some judges will throw out an existing eviction if you accept the partial rent.
Yeah, I'm always torn on that because I feel like if they have money, I want to take it because
I know.
If they have a car
problem, it might
problem,
be the last money you see.
Right, exactly. Yeah. If they have a car problem the next week when they're trying to save up, they're probably going to get their car fixed, and I'm not going to get paid. So, like, has that ever come up where
it has not? I mean, so what has happened is that for budgetary, process purposes, I've had tenants say, I get paid every 2 weeks. Do you mind if I pay $425 every 2 weeks as opposed to, and as long as I know ahead of time, then absolutely I'm good with that.
Okay.
And I've never really had a tenant put in money other than the rent amount without telling me they're about to do that.
Okay.
Yeah. So it hasn't been a problem yet.
Okay. Tell me about your key system. So you said you have electronic locks on all the doors?
Yeah. So do you ever see that TV show from years ago? I think it was called One Day at a Time or something.
Yeah.
Where they had that janitor, Schneider, right?
Uh-huh.
And he had this massive keychain.
Yeah.
With like, I don't know, 100 keys on it. And that's what I found my world was. I'm like, keys are such a pain in my business. People move, you got to rekey it or relock it. And I don't know how to do any of that. I'm an idiot, and so,
right.
Move outs were a bit of a pain. So I'm going to say about 2 years ago, I tapped out. I said, enough, there's got to be a better way. But electronic locks were just so expensive. It's like $130. And, you think you got 2 doors, it's $250 a door plus, times all the doors. It's a big investment. So I found a lock. I'll just tell you what it is. They should pay me a commission. They know people that use it because of this, but it's the Quickset 905.
Okay.
So just sort of look that up. Here's the beauty about the Quickset 905 is it's a deadbolt lock, okay? And it's like $38 on Amazon. It's not even a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, but what the beauty about the Quickset 905 is that dead batteries were always going to be the issue, right? You can't rely on the tenants to change them. You just can't, Yeah. So if a battery dies, they get locked out. And it's like, then who are they going to call? They're going to call me.
Right.
They're not going to call Ghostbusters. They're going to call me,
right.
And therefore I failed at my mission to minimize calls. Right. So what happens with the Quickset 905 is it has 2 little nubs that stick out. And so if the batteries are dead, or even if the batteries are not even in the unit, all you have to do is hold a 9-volt battery up to those 2 nubs. It'll light up and then enter your code. You can get in. So with a 9-volt battery, even if somebody went to every door I own and took out all the batteries, I can get into any of my units with a 9-volt battery. It becomes my master key.
Oh, right. Okay.
So if a tenant ever, lets both their door batteries die, which what are the odds? But it happens. run to a CVS, buy a 9-volt battery, you get in, no problem.
All right. Okay. Problem solved. That's great. And then you're never having to get the call at 2 a.m. Hey, we got locked out, because they can always get in. Awesome. Now, what about mowing the lawns? What are you doing? You've got apartment buildings, you've got lawns typically. How do you deal with that?
So, well, depending on the layout of the lawn, usually what I'll do is eliminate the lawn. So in a Class C, where I own in central Connecticut, it's not really a lawn type of neighborhood. Okay. There's not like swing sets and things like that. It's just not enough space. So you end up getting these small little lawns, 10 by 10, real tiny little squares and little strip of grass up and down each side of the building typically. So what I'll do is I'll actually take that lawn out. And what I'll do is I'll put in rocks. So, but you don't want to put in little pea stone gravel type of rocks, because then what happens is that becomes a patio.
Right.
And then you become the neighborhood gathering spot. So all the late Friday night beer drinking happens in your patio.
Right.
So what I do is I have say baseball sized rocks. They go. So what's nice about that is in New England, if leaves fall and I have somebody blow the leaves off, the pebbles won't go everywhere. But also that you can't set a chair on there because it'll tilt sideways. So it's uncomfortable to try to sit there.
Nice,
so people won't kind of gather in your spot.
Well, I love it. I mean, you've really got this dialed in. I love everything that you're doing. Congratulations. It sounds like you're really managing your rental portfolio without a lot of touches and doing things right.
It's a work in progress. What I've learned is, it's that there's just no finish line, right? You think, well, you wake up one day and like, that's it, I know everything. Like then they change the law. Then you get some tenant that pulls a fast one. You know, I wouldn't have thought of that. Add that to the lease, And but yeah, it's so far it's been very good to me. We've certainly had our challenges. Right now, I do self-manage everything. I just don't do the accounting, but everything else I do: vacancy showings, rent collection, maintenance calls. It probably is 20 hours a month. Probably on average.
Not bad.
No, it really isn't. It really is passive income with a few glaring exceptions.
In addition to his rental portfolio, Ron also runs the CT RIA, which is an organization that provides networking opportunities and education for local investors. If you're in the central Connecticut area and you want to reach out to Ron or check out one of his meetings, just let him know that you heard him on the podcast, and he'd be happy to provide you with a free ticket to check out one of his monthly meetings. You can track Ron down at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 281. If Ron inspired you and you're ready to buy your first rental or you want to add to your portfolio, the lender that I recommend is our sponsor today. It's Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. Chaley is a nationwide lender, and she specializes in helping investors buy rental properties. She has a ton of different loan programs, and she can find something that'll work for you in your situation. If you want to find out more or set up a time to talk to Chaley, just go to her website, ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE, lendinggroup.com. If you mention Rental Income Podcast, she will waive all the pre-qualification fees. NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. Make sure you subscribe. We have new interviews every single Tuesday. And if you subscribe, you'll get notified as soon as they come out. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.